Superman is, without a doubt, the most recognisable and iconic superhero in the world, and the character has served as the face for the entire genre ever since he leapt onto the pages of comics in a single bound back in 1938, and then onto the silver screen again in 1978. The classic Richard Donner Superman the movie stands apart as a moment in time and has left a long-standing legacy, both in terms of cinema and the idea of the blockbuster film, and also in proving that superheroes can be a success on the big screen, something we're all too familiar with today. Despite this, the Superman film series has had its fair share of problems. The series, born out of the toil of Donner, had fallen on hard times in the years following, after the critical failures of Superman 3 and Superman 4 The Quest for Peace, and it wasn't until 1989's Batman that superhero movies returned to the forefront of the cultural zeitgeist, but now presented in a much darker manner. Over the next decade, Warner Brothers sought to revitalise the Man of Tomorrow and return him to the big screen, attempting everything from a poorly devised Superman 5 to the infamous Tim Burton directed Superman Lives project, starring Nicolas Cage. None of these managed to materialise though, and as we entered the new millennium, Superman seemed to be fading, a distant memory in cinema that could never be replicated. However, Warner Brothers were adamant that the Man of Steel would return to the big screen, and chose to take a leap of faith, giving this universally beloved character and franchise to an up-and-coming screenwriter currently making his name on the ABC television series Alias, JJ Abrams. In 2002, when commissioned to pen a screenplay for a new Superman film, Abrams was still relatively unknown in Hollywood, several years away from carving his name through his hit series Lost. And when faced with bringing back such an iconic character as Superman, it could be a daunting task for any screenwriter. Abrams, however, refused to play it safe. Turning in his original draft in July 2002, Abrams completely reimagined the Superman mythos, offering up a fresh and somewhat controversial spin on the beloved character, much in the same way he did several years later with his reboot of Star Trek. Firstly, JJ sought to start from the beginning, establishing the planet Krypton and the circumstances which predicated its downfall, a disastrous civil war which had ravaged the planet, forcing Jor-El, now depicted as Krypton's king, to send his only son to Earth in an attempt to spare his life from his tyrannical uncle, Katazor. And while this sounds extremely different from what we're used to, Abrams was quick to point out that he sought to focus much of the origin on Clark's upbringing on Earth, telling Empire magazine that "The thing I tried to emphasise in the story was that if the Kents found the boy, Kal-El, who had the power that he did, he would most likely kill them both in short order," and the idea that these parents would see, if they were lucky to survive long enough, that they had to immediately begin teaching this kid to limit himself and not be so fast, not be so strong, and not be so powerful. The script would then introduce much of the traditional characters and locations expected to be found within a Superman film: Lois Lane, Perry White, Lex Luthor, Metropolis, Smallville, and so on, but reimagined for Abrams' new vision. For example, while Lex still served as a main antagonist in his story, he wasn't exactly the cunning billionaire we know him to be, instead a federal CIA agent obsessed with aliens and UFOs. The film would also borrow heavily from Dan Jurgens' seminal 1992 comic book, The Death of Superman, which Warner Brothers was also keen to adapt at this time, serving as a major inspiration for Burton's Superman Lives project also, with Superman murdered by Kryptonian soldiers led by the General Tyzor, son of Katazor and cousin of Kal-El, before being resurrected and rescuing the Earth from its alien conquerors, before setting off to find Krypton, which, in Abrams' treatment, didn't blow up but was still under the ruthless fist of Katazor. Furthermore, in later drafts, he also toyed with the idea of outing Lex Luthor as a Kryptonian sleeper agent, with the film's climax to be a Man of Steel-esque battle sequence between the two metahumans, with Superman defeating Lex. Despite the major deviations from the source material, Warner Brothers was still keen to produce the script, seeing the success of Sony's Spider-Man film earlier that year, but were nerved at the idea of handing directing duties over to the young screenwriter. After previously approaching Charlie's Angel director McGee, Rush Hour director Brett Ratner was hired to helm the film in September 2002, and casting talks along with concept art had begun to surface soon after. Ratner was keen to avoid hiring an A-list actor to play the role of Superman, after approaching the likes of Jude Law, Paul Walker and Josh Hartnett. In early 2003, he told IGN that no star wants to sign that, but as much as I've told Jude and Josh my vision for the movie, I've warned them the consequences of being Superman. They'll live this character for 10 years because I'm telling one story over 3 movies, and plan to direct all 3 if the first is as successful as everyone suspects. In addition, several high-profile names were targeted for Superman's supporting cast, most notably Kerry Russell and Amy Adams as Lois Lane, the latter who would go on to play the role in 2013's Man of Steel, Anthony Hopkins as Jor-El, and Christopher Walken as Perry White, with Joel Edgerton also auditioning for the role of the villainous Tyzor. However, while things had appeared to be moving forward for Flyby, the production came to a halt in March 2003, with Ratner leaving the project after excessive creative differences with producer John Peters and the escalating budget of which Abrams' script demanded. As a result, McG was brought back onto the project to replace Ratner, bringing in the OC creator Josh Schwartz to redraft Abrams' screenplay, while Robert Downey Jr. had allegedly signed on to play Lex Luthor. With a tweaked script, ESC Entertainment was hired to create the film's visual effects, costumes were created, and the film was set to shoot the following year, despite arguments between studio executives and McG over whether to shoot Flyby in Canada or Australia, with the director stating that it was inappropriate to try and capture the heart of America on another continent. This proved to be one stumbling block too many for the film, and as every day passed, the prospects of it actually being made began to dwindle. Test footage was shot for the film with several candidates for the Man of Steel, with eventual casting Henry Cavill shooting scenes, but little more movement on the project was made, and McG exited the project in June 2004. Interestingly, around this time, X-Men director Bryan Singer had pitched his idea for a new Superman film to Warner Brothers. This version, however, a continuation of the classic Christopher Reeve series, albeit with a fresh actor occupying the role of Superman. Singer signed on a month after McG's departure, and Flyby became little more than another what could have been in the Hollywood graveyard. And while Singer's resulting effort, 2006's Superman Returns, was hardly beloved by audiences who found the film to lack the necessary action and excitement that a Superman movie should entail, I can't help but kind of be glad that Abrams' vision was never realised. Don't get me wrong, I like JJ Abrams as a filmmaker, but I feel that this drastically different take on Superman would have been detrimental to both the long-term cinematic success of the character, but also to Abrams' career as an aspiring director and producer. If Flyby had received the same reactions upon release as it had when Abrams' script was leaked online in September 2002, it would likely have killed any attempt for him to make future projects such as Lost and Cloverfield, as well as finding work in established franchises such as Mission Impossible 3 and his reboot of Star Trek. Moreover, while I like Abrams' decision to offer a unique take on Superman, change isn't always positive, and Flyby's story felt so drastically un-Superman that it would have been better served as an original, yet still generic feeling sci-fi epic. The film would also have had serious ramifications to the landscape of comic book movies as we know them. If Flyby had been released in summer 2006 instead of Singer's Returns, it's likely that Warner Brothers would be reluctant to make another attempt to retell the character's backstory only a few years later, meaning no Man of Steel, and therefore no DC Extended Universe. And while casting announcements for this film were scarce, McG had stated on multiple occasions that Robert Downey Jr. signed on to play Lex Luthor, and this itself would have definitely hurt his chances of landing the role of Iron Man 2 years later, fundamentally changing the nucleus of what grew into the Marvel Cinematic Universe and began to revolutionise the entire superhero movie genre. If Superman Flyby had failed to impress audiences and critics, it's likely that comic book movies would still be in the same slump they were at the time of the film's production. Sure, there were diamonds in the rough such as Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, Singer's X-Men, and Christopher Nolan's fresh take on Batman in 2005, but the genre was nowhere near the commercial juggernaut that we now know it to be today, and likely would never have been able to become this either. Hey everyone, thank you for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please make sure to leave a comment down below and discuss anything we talked about in the video. What do you think about JJ Abrams' proposed idea for Superman Flyby? Would you have liked to have seen it? And what do you think the long-term impacts of this movie being made would have been in terms of comic book movies over the last decade. I really want to hear what you all have to say about that. If you enjoyed this video, there are some more videos on screen right now that you will also enjoy, and if you would like to read the videos as opposed to just watching them, you can go to my new website, owenlikescomics.com. It hosts written versions of all the case study videos, along with some exclusive blog posts and articles that I just felt like writing for you. Anyway, that's all for me, guys. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here, and I will be back in a few weeks. And until then, take care and keep reading.